When I made a short video about Vampire Survivors 2 years ago, I was never expecting a brand new game genre to emerge from its concept. Bullet Heaven is the best version of an existing game genre in both name and mechanics. There's no shortage of these games to try either, especially considering how many appear on Steam Next Fest now. They all have their own twists on the core concept, but one in particular caught my eye late last year. Choo Choo Survivor. A game about a train blasting its way through hordes of zombies to reach the finish line. Now that's what I'm talking about. Visually, Choo Choo has that Survivor-like flair, middling art combined with copious enemies and projectiles. Only done worse than many contemporaries. The visual aesthetic is the worst part of Choo Choo for me, mostly because of how samey everything looks. Environments especially. There's dead trees and buildings, but bland ground with brightly colored enemies will be the main visuals. It's also incredibly orange, but I think that gives the aesthetic a sort of charm to it, even if that charm does not outweigh the flaws. The audio is about on par with the visuals. There is no original audio in this game from what I can tell. When I hear your main theme and I've heard that exact song in a bunch of jank, I automatically get bad vibes. Sorry, but that's the cold truth of using these popular royalty-free music tracks. And stock train sounds. My guy didn't even mix them, just threw them in there. Listen to the difference in picking these trains. It's wild. Vampire Survivors might have had arguably terrible visuals, but it nailed its sound design. Opening a chest in Vampire Survivors was such an event. Here in Choo Choo, it is the most mild of hurrahs. Like, this is a bit of a genuine disappointment for me, and so far, I feel like all I've done is dunk on an indie dev doing the best with what they have. Which sucks because I know not everyone is an artist, animator, programmer, musician, voice actor, and tender lover all in one. But I will argue that spending a small amount of capital on original assets pays large dividends in the eyes of a player. Your presentation is, after all, the very first thing a player is going to interact with, and it's why I'm focusing so much on it at the start of this video, and every other video I make. That rant aside, you may be asking yourself, why do I like Choo Choo Survivors? Well, in terms of gameplay, CCS is unique for Bullet Heaven. It is the only game in the genre that limits your movement. As a train, you can only move along the X-axis, traveling past ruins and picking up supplies like fuel. It's pretty important to keep the train moving. Your goal is to either reach the end of the line within 30 minutes or survive the 5-minute boss wave thereafter. In typical Survivors fashion, the game becomes more difficult as time goes along with new and more numerous enemies, including ones that can debuff your train in various ways. But you're able to upgrade your train in-game using supplies. This can be in the form of new weapons, improving existing ones, acquiring relics with unique effects, and purchasing various power-ups. There's also a mechanic where you can find survivors in the world and then assign them a position on your train. It runs the gamut from decreasing enemy debuff times to increasing weapon damage. These can be adjusted on the fly to what suits your current need. Entire new trains are unlocked with their own strengths, weaknesses, and weapon combinations. It is important to note that you will only be able to use the weapons allotted to that particular train. With upgrades, you can have up to 5 weapons, but at least 2 of those will be duplicates by necessity. One thing I neglected to mention about the weapons until now is that you are able to change their firing modes. There are 4 different options to choose, with closest and circular being the most useful in my experience. Random is just that, and it's unreliable as a result. Aiming at the cursor is useful in niche cases, but the issue with that is how experience is gathered. In other Survivors games, the player must get close enough to experience points in order to gather them. Not so here, since we are limited to the rails. So experience is gathered by moving the cursor around to the gems, which can prove to be a bit of an issue when you're trying to shoot at the endless spawning enemies, but also need the experience for the free supplies on level up. Those weapons won't upgrade themselves. There are some bosses here, and unlike most Survivors games, where bosses are time-based, these are contextual. You will find these containers during your playtime at specific points and are given the option to open them. Doing so starts a boss fight that will typically give huge rewards for success. But if you're feeling like your train can't take this boss, you can just pass it by without a thought and be not much worse for it. They end up being optional challenges that really get you ahead quickly if you feel like you've optimized your train well. And then there's the final boss wave. For 5 minutes, every enemy, boss, and newly unveiled super boss will be gunning at you from all sides. It is very unlikely that you will survive such an event. That is, unless you have found the bunker toward the end of the line. Once built, it will use the weapon that your train started with, providing you with a 6th, potentially 7th gun. Not only that, but these weapons can also be upgraded just like the ones on the train. And the bunker will even give you the option to skip to the boss wave rather than waiting around. It is a necessary piece of infrastructure to make it through that final boss wave. At time of writing, I have not seen all of the game's content, but I have seen enough that I can make a decent judgment call. While the presentation of Choo Choo Survivors might not be impressive, the gameplay is captivating by imposing movement limitations not seen in other bullet heaven games. That gimmick works very well for me, and I found the actual gameplay to be something enjoyable to turn my brain off and play for a period. And like Vampire Survivors before it, the price of entry is an incentive. $2.99 USD is a steal for the amount of time and enjoyment I got out of Choo Choo, but probably not by much. Its aesthetic flaws will likely keep most away, but I'm really hoping a video that shows off the gameplay gives a much better understanding of the game in general. In any case, spend your money wisely, kids. Thanks for watching. More garbage to come.